TGIF, everybody. It is about 9:05 in the morning. I don't have to be at work until about 4:30 unless they call me, which if they do, I'm not going to answer because I'm going in at my regular time. But I want to talk about something. I just read this on Facebook, and someone told me just to automatically do a video on this because this is something that's been brewing for years, if not the past year or so. And I guess it's been ignited even more so in the recent wake, if you will, or the recent controversy of the Donald Sterling racial situation that basically got him banned from the NBA for life. And that is, according to several news sources, online and newspaper-wise and all that, it seems that 50 senators, from what one source has said was mostly made up of Democratic senators, have all sent a letter to Dan Snyder, to the NFL and Dan Snyder, to basically have the Washington Redskins name changed. Basically have the Redskin name changed to something else. Now, Dan Snyder and the NFL's response, sorry, the Redskins are keeping Dan Snyder's response, and well, actually I should say Dan Snyder's response, but not the NFL's, as far as I know. I think the NFL may as well be saying this, but basically the response is, thanks, but no thanks, the Redskins are keeping the name. Now I know a lot of people could pretty much understand that when they look at the Washington Redskin name, when they look at names like Redskins and Braves, and they, and Indians, if you will. When they look at these names, in any other what many would consider racially absurd names or racially insensitive names for teams, like Florida State Seminoles, if you will, in the college ranks. You're going to have a lot of people, a lot of detractors about that. But here's something about sports. And I've played sports in high school and stuff, and I'm a fan of sports. I'm a fan of all sports. I probably don't watch all of sports because I work, but I am a fan. And I know my history. I know a good history of sports, especially sports teams. I know a good history on some of the sports that I like. And I know that teams like in sports, in leagues like the NFL, the Washington Redskins were one of the very first teams ever, I believe. One of the very first teams. One of the very first teams ever, and they have been the Redskins since their very existence. They were basically one of the very first teams when the NFL was first starting to get a foothold. They were one of the first teams, as far as I know, along with the likes of the Bears and the Packers and several others. And since the inaugural inception, almost at the beginning of the NFL, they have been recognized by people, by the fans, by their own fans, and by rival fans as the Washington Redskins. Now, yes, they tried changing a lot, visually about them, to try to, be more modern, more updated, more hip. I don't know if this is when they first started, or if it was just a trial period, But there was one time that instead of having the logo they have right now, the helmets, that they would take the Indian off of it, and put the R. And thus, it would still be Redskins, they just have the R instead of the recognizable Indian face. And then, not that long ago, a couple of years ago, they tried to go the Florida State Seminole route by changing the entire look. No more of what they had, no more of what they've always known for. No more of that traditional look. They went with the Florida State Seminole look, which, from what I've seen, they do pull out on occasions, once in a while. But they went in that direction, and let's just say it kind of backfired on them. But like I said, I think there have been times where they do pull it out every now and then, just to kind of, I think, cool the waters, if you know what I mean. But most of their time, for most of their existence, they have had that traditional logo that we all know them for. And you know, the Redskins are not the only team in sports that has been or is being pestered to change their names. They're not. You've got the Atlanta Braves. You got the Cleveland Indians. You got several other teams. You got the Florida State Seminoles, a college team, if you will, that have all been all been basically pushed into changing their names. But just like Dan Snyder and possibly the NFL, their owners and their leagues have basically, their owners and Major League Baseball have basically said, thanks but no thanks. It's because they know fans recognize the teams by their names. Fans recognize them. Rival fans recognize them. And believe it or not, both Cleveland and Atlanta, in their own ways, have been trying to kind of develop a compromise. With Cleveland, you don't usually see the traditional Cleveland Indian logo sometimes. A majority of the time, you'll see them just with a C. And that's it. You'll just see them with a C, just like back in the old days. You know, Braves, they try to accommodate too, in their own unique way, as far as I know. But, I mean, they put the A, they don't put no, they put the A there. Yeah, they got the tomahawk and all that, but they put the A. For Atlanta, it's like, okay, they're accommodating you guys, what's the big deal? Now, Florida State, they obviously have some kind of deal or something that allows them to stay the Seminoles, but just like with the Redskins, just like with the Indians, just like with the Braves, they too at times do get pestered. They do at times get pestered by the Senate, by Native American, by basically all these groups that feel these names are racially insensitive. And you know what? And you know what? I can probably understand where they're coming from with all this, but like I said, despite what they want to see happen, these names are not going to go away anytime soon. Now you might say, well, a lot of teams have changed their names at times. Yeah, they have changed their names. Don't get me wrong about that. They have changed their names. But what I have noticed is a lot of these teams, after not even maybe 30 or 20 years, end up in the league. Not even after 30, 20 years in the league, they end up changing their names. They do. I mean, heck, go to the NHL. Several of their teams that have moved around from different locations in Canada, in the U.S., from the U.S. to Canada, from Canada to the U.S., they've either kept their names by some way, altered it, or they've changed completely. One good example, Dallas Stars. There used to be the Minnesota North Stars. Now they're just the Dallas Stars. Anaheim Mighty Ducks, or Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. Now they're just the Anaheim Ducks. And the list could go on. You know, and there are several teams in the NFL and Major League Baseball. They haven't, and even the NBA, they haven't been around that long. They've only been around for maybe 30, 40 years. 40 to 30 years, maybe 50 years. And only like when they enter the 30th or 40th year, do they ever consider or ever even do what a lot of fans obviously don't like them doing, but they end up doing it anyway, and that's change the name. I mean, you take a look at the Washington Wizards, if you will. The Washington Wizards used to be the Washington Bullets. Something happened to where they didn't like that name, and they said, you're not the Bullets anymore, you're the Wizards. Take a look at the New Orleans Pelicans, if you will. I know it's kind of weird to say that, right? New Orleans Pelicans. They used to be the New Orleans Hornets, and they used to be the New Orleans Hornets. They kept the Hornet name even after they left Charlotte, but as soon as they came to New Orleans, eventually it was decided they had to change the name to give the city its own identity, and thus the Pelicans were born. You know, things like that. You know, the Oklahoma City Thunder. You know, they used to be the Seattle Supersonics. They could have easily remained the Oklahoma City Supersonics or the Oklahoma City Sonics, but instead they said, nope, we're going to give our team a new identity, Oklahoma City Thunder. Sacramento, Sacramento, for example, you know, was very close to losing the Kings to possibly Seattle. And Seattle could have remained, and there was the option of either keeping them as keeping the Kings name and calling them Seattle Kings, or saying, you know what, or as it was also reported, not keeping the Kings name, but totally renaming them and giving them thus a rebirth as the new and improved Seattle Supersonics. Yeah. They were either going to, if Sacramento would have lost the Kings, which thankfully they didn't, you would have either had them be the Seattle Kings, or they would have been reborn as the new Seattle Supersonics. And believe me, Seattle, you will get an NBA team, and it will be the Supersonics again. You just got to be patient. But the point is, teams have gone through all this before. It's because they've moved to a new location, or maybe it's because they felt or maybe they were just or maybe they were asked or forced by the league, or maybe by senates or political pressure to change. You know, take a look at the Tampa Bay Rays. They used to be the Devil Rays. Something happened, they said, forget the Devil Rays, you're just the Rays. You know? And it's not even, you know, mascot names either. Sometimes they just change where they're from, or what city they're representing. You know, for example, Miami Marlins. For most of their franchise history, they were the Florida Marlins. Guess what? They became Miami Marlins as soon as they got that new stadium. Colorado Rockies. Don't tell me don't tell me for one moment, for one instant, that has not been discussed to just go out and call them the Denver Rockies, because I'm sure it's been discussed, and I'm sure it's still being discussed. You know, you take a look at the NFL. When the Houston Oilers went to Tennessee for 1 year or so, for the first years there, they were the Tennessee Oilers. Following year, they got a new identity. They became the Titans, because the Oilers represented Houston. They were still looked at as the Houston Oilers. They needed their own identity, just like with the NBA New Orleans Pelicans. So what did Houston do? It took a while, but they got the Texans. So, and here's what's crazy about it. Houston Texans? No one finds that racially insensitive. Why? Because it's not. And I know you're thinking, well, that's just a play off the fact that people from Texas are called Texans. Yeah, I get that, but some people from certain states, whether it's Texas, California, Kansas, Utah. If you call them, oh, there's those Californians, or there's those Kansans, or whatever, if you find a way to say, oh, there's those Texans, sometimes people will find that insensitive. But again, you have Houston Texans, and that's not bothering anybody. It's not really bothering anybody. I mean, it'd be like if the Wildlife Fund said, you know what, Chicago, we don't like the fact that you're using two bear names for your two professional sports teams. We think you should change the Chicago Bears to the Chicago Crickets and the Chicago Cubs to the Chicago Boy Scouts. And when I listen to this, folks, I listen to this kind of stuff, I'm like, seriously. You know, again, like I mentioned earlier, I understand where you're coming from. I can respect it in some ways, but you have to realize that sometimes change is not for the better. Especially when it comes to sports teams, especially sports teams that have been with their league, their respective leagues and sports since the very inception, just like the Redskins have been. Now I can understand that eventually, maybe down the line, it's going to happen. Eventually, it's bound to happen that the Redskins are going to be forced to change their names to something else. Maybe the Red Hawks or something. I don't know. But I can guarantee you this. When that day comes, and I think anybody watching this video knows it will, there's going to be a massive... The NFL, not mostly the NFL, but whoever forces the NFL, whoever forces Dan Snyder to do this, they're going to have a huge major league problem on their hands. Especially when it comes to football historians and when it comes to the traditional long-time Washington Redskin fans, whether they're there in Washington, D.C., Landover, Maryland, or around the world, they're going to have a problem. They are. Because it would be just like if you told the Minnesota Vikings, hey, Vikings is insensitive, change it to something else. It's not going to happen. So, to me, this is the way I look at it. I can understand and respect why a lot of people, even these 50 Democratic senators, feel that the Redskins name is racially insensitive, especially in light of what's recently gone down with Donald Sterling in the NBA. But I can say this. Yes, I understand that someday it's going to happen. But until that day comes, for anybody that feels this way, this is my opinion, I know and understand and respect you may find it racially insensitive. But it's basically how this team is recognized. It's how these fans love this team. They recognize this team. And yeah, there's a lot of fans that probably feel the name is insensitive too. Racially insensitive too. But they respect this team. They love this team. And this is how they and everybody else throughout all of sports and entertainment recognize this team. Because believe me, when a team changes their name, it's hard. It takes a while for fans and reporters, sports reporters, and basically people all across media to get used to calling them by that new name, because they'll be so used to calling them something else. I would not be surprised that if, like on ESPN, let's say this name change happens, and they're called the Red Hawks or whatever, and they're reporting on a game between the Washington Red Hawks and the Chicago Bears, and one of the ESPN guys on SportsCenter accidentally says Redskins. It's going to be because they're so used to calling them that. So yeah, I understand a change will probably be coming soon. Hopefully not too soon. But this is why some of you have to understand. People are used to that name. And yeah, even if they do change the name, it's going to be hard. Hard to get used to it because, like I just showed you, some people may accidentally still call them by that name, the Redskins. But to me, hopefully the change will not happen for a long time. And this is coming from somebody that's a true red and gold San Francisco 49er fan, and at times, if necessary, occasional Raider fan. So, let me know what you guys, and Kansas City Chief fan. So let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. Video responses are greatly appreciated. Talk to you all later.